Welcome to the Healthier Tech Podcast, the show about building a healthier relationship with technology. Now here's your host, R. Blank.
Today I'm joined by Pratika Katiyar, an activist and writer working at the intersection of technology, politics, and civil liberties. Pratika works on privacy at the ACLU, where her work focuses on protecting free expression, advancing ethical approaches to emerging technologies, and ensuring that the voices and rights of women and marginalized communities aren't sidelined in the tech policy conversation. I'm really looking forward to unpacking how technology policy shapes our daily lives and where we need to be more thoughtful and more critical as these tools continue to evolve. Welcome to the Healthier Tech Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to this. So, just as a kicking off point, can you explain in a little more detail what the day-to-day of your job entails?
Absolutely. So I think one of the things I love about my job, but it can be a curse, is that it's super multifaceted, but can often rely on like what's going on around the country. Since the ACLU does do rapid response and advocacy around the current events and the issues going on in the United States. So my day to day is a lot of like writing, policy research. I'm often in the weeds on different privacy policies and trying to understand, like, one of the things I was recently looking at was like social media privacy policies with Discord and TikTok, and they had recently updated their privacy policies. So what does that mean for consumers? Because my team is always advocating for consumer protections, better privacy rights for people in the United States, since we don't have like a federal privacy law. So that's kind of what my day-to-day is a lot of policy research. I'm tracking laws that are being introduced in different state legislatures and seeing how we can advocate for them or maybe not advocate for them if we're against it, or if it's maybe not aligning with our positions. So lots of research, lots of trying to understand what policies mean for consumers, which is really important and are often overlooked.
Yeah. So it's interesting to me that you mentioned state legislatures because your job involves tech policy, and it feels to me like the United States, the federal government, essentially has no real technology policy. Now, is there one? Am I being just too jaded?
So I think there is one, and it's often overlooked, and is actually in the process of it's under reconsideration. It's called Section 230, and it's part of the Communications Decency Act, but most of that act was struck down except for Section 230.
Was that the safe harbor?
No, that was, or it was, actually maybe. I was,
Okay.
section, I was like, maybe. I completely like don't think about the other parts of the Communications Decency Act. I'm mainly like
Sure.
Section 230 because it's so important. It's called like the First Amendment of the internet. And it essentially protects platforms from liability for speech on their platform. And there's downfalls to Section 230, but it's really what enables us to be on the internet and be able to retain anonymity, be able to retain our free speech rights by saying like, whatever we want within reason, and not facing like any censorship or consequences for it. So it's a really vital piece of technology policy that I think, the federal government did get right, or in some aspects, like is very important for the modern internet.
So that I think we are talking about the same thing. So
Okay.
and that act, I believe, is it's from the 1990s or the early
Yes.
2000s. So it's
Yes,
pretty dated
90s.
at this point. And it is what has effectively shielded all of these social media platforms from any liability of the content being published on those platforms. Is that
Yeah.
understanding correct? Okay.
Yeah.
And so to your view, that is the only real technology policy that the government has?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, and again, I don't even think it's perfect, and I think it could be reformed and revisited in this modern age of what's going on online and on different social media platforms. But I think that's the only technology policy I can really point to and be like, yeah, the federal government like really did this. um,
Yeah. And
yeah,
so, but you mentioned there's more activity at the state level.
absolutely.
Yeah.
There's
So,
good and bad activity at the state level.
yeah. So, yeah, maybe some highlights.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a ton of states, I think close to 20 that have consumer privacy laws. So that's, California, Colorado, Virginia, like they all have different forms of a law in place to protect consumers by giving them data choice rights so they can go to like any social media platform or any website or any service and be like, I would like you to delete all my information. I would like you to, give me access to the information you have on me. So I think that's like a really good example of good state legislature. But then there's or sorry, good state like laws, but I think there's some bad ones too, being considered around like age verification online and having consumers upload their license and their credit card to then gain access to certain
I
sites and
just read
services.
Discord is introducing that next month, I think. But if you don't do age verification, you're only going to be able to access certain Discords, and in order to access all Discords, you're going to need to go through either face scanning or identification verification.
Which is, wild because Discord just recently got hacked. So, and age verification, it's often like, portrayed as we're helping protect kids, but I think everyone has to then upload. Like, it doesn't matter if you're 30 years old, you still have to upload your information and often your sensitive personal information or biometric information for those laws.
Yeah, I remember when I was 30 and got carded. So I thanked the guy. So, so what are in terms of you, so far in our conversation, we've been talking about consumer kind of in a general way. But in your introduction, I specified that you focus, so at least part of your focus is on women and marginalized communities. How do their rights get impacted differently? And what are the unique perspectives that filter brings to this topic?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons I got into technology policy is because I and so many women I spoke to had faced online harassment just on social media and seeing how it disproportionately impacted women who are activists and journalists and essentially drove them off those platforms. I had a friend who completely quit being a politics reporter because she faced just so much online harassment. People were doxing her, they were finding her address, sending her death threats. So it really spirals and it's very quick and networked, and goes hand in hand with disinformation campaigns. And so that was kind of how I got into tech policy. And then throughout my work, recently, I've really focused on women in the sense of we're kind of seeing this broad assault on reproductive rights in the United States, and at least in my perspective. And I think uh, a lot of that is related to on like the online world. We're just not making that connection as broadly yet. But I recently did like an investigation for Rewire News on how our health data and all of our sources of information are now migrating online. So women are using period trackers, they're using online sources to get information about abortion care or contraception. And when social media platforms maybe ban or shadow ban the terms, I did an investigation finding out that, Meta platforms were shadow banning the word abortion. Um, it was just interesting because that's women being impacted and that's access to information, which is a free speech issue, but it's also a tech policy issue. So I really try to focus on the issues that are mattering so much. Another example is immigration and surveillance right now. I know that's huge in the United States, but just around the world, like so many tech companies are getting into contracts with governments to increase the use of surveillance technology at our borders or just in everyday day to day, like, using your phone to record people to put them in a database. So it's just so slowly getting integrated and really harming marginalized communities, just slowly based on the issues that are ongoing in the
Y-
world. So
Yeah,
that's what
so
I try to do.
those
Yeah.
were three really gigantic examples. I
I know.
appreciate that. So, but
Huge.
let me try to dig into and we can jump between them. But let's start first with the doxing one. Um, the doxing is really only effective if it is posted to one of these networks that are protected by Section 230. So how do you kind of approach solutions to a problem like that?
Oh, that's a great question. I remember in college when I was like writing a paper on this because I was at one point like, yes, I like Section 230 because it's enabling free speech online, but also what happens when that's weaponized. Um, I think there needs to be carve outs in Section 230. There aren't, surprisingly, for things like non consensual intimate imagery or um doxing and harassment. I think it's a really like push and pull situation because on one hand you're like, I want people to be able to say what they want to say online, but the other is like they're using it to harm other people. Um I it is true that it is primarily on social media platforms, and I think one of those one of the like important caveats is that social media platforms aren't regulated at all, let alone, like, the speech on their platforms being regulated, like, they don't follow privacy laws generally, or they get fined for it if they don't, so there's just so many more ways to regulate them. I do think carving out Section 230 is one of them, but, I mean, like, let's have a federal privacy law. Let's, like, give women and consumers back some of their rights online, so they can then take it into their own hands.
And what would a and if this is going outside of the stuff you work on, just let me know. But what would a federal privacy law look like? Could we just maybe copy what the EU or the state of California has done? Or is that insufficient? Or does that not even touch on, the key points that you feel are important from your work?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I did, like, a little bit of work, when I was at Penn America on what it would look like if GDPR was adapted in the US, and I think there's some key things, that wouldn't work out really well. So, the GDPR has a right to be forgotten, and
Mm-hmm.
that wouldn't really work out in the US in terms of free speech and in terms of like preserving journalism and the vitality of like having articles out there and then allowing consumers to be like, I don't want my name in this article, even if that article is like vital journalism. So I think from a free speech standpoint, there's also like tension there with the right to be forgotten. But I do think California has a pretty model privacy law. Same with Colorado. I think those are really effective, privacy laws that, if adapted, I mean, California serves millions and millions of residents. I think if adapted on a federal level would really help with some of the discussions we're having right now around like, kids' privacy online and child safety. We wouldn't be needing to enact all these age verification laws if we just have stronger privacy laws in place that can then allow even kids to like have their own privacy rights.
And, and so, but how would you help me get my head around? How would you have children have their own privacy rights without some sort of age verification?
I mean, if there's a federal privacy law, I think it would apply to like all consumers. So even as a kid, you could fill out like you could send to Instagram, please delete all my data, or please allow me to see what data you have on me.
I see.
So
Okay.
they would also have that right.
And they don't, and so just because I think there are, like, I think, and I might be naive here, but I think, for instance, on Google, it's not easy, but I think they do have a way to find for the consumer to find everything that Google knows about them. And again, I might be naive in that Google knows a lot more, but it's my understanding that at least Google exposes some kind of feature like that. I don't know though how I'm not on social media, so I don't know how common this is. Do the platforms offer this kind of feature or functionality, or how is it just missing?
I think it's kind of missing. I think you can see in some ways, like on Meta's Instagram, like you can see your account history for since you've had it and what you've commented and your activity. But I also don't know what information they have on me. Like, do they know where I live? Are they getting metadata every time I'm on the app? Are they using that for targeted ads, which I know they are because I get very targeted ads. And I'm curious. I want to know what they know about me. Do they know my age, like they know my email? What else do they know? I think, it's not always about what we can see that they know, but like what the unknown is that they might have on us. And
And
that's
they're
like
under no obligation to tell us.
not at all. Not right now, at
Even
least.
if I were a Californian, or like, what are the extents of that law?
So I think if you are in California or another state with a privacy law, then you can then request that information.
Okay.
But otherwise, like in the US, and that's the issue with this patchwork is like, depending on where you are, like you might not be able to ask them.
Right. Right. Yeah. When I was studying this, that was called the Laboratory of Democracy, not a patchwork, but yeah, no, it feels. I mean, it's cool that you're young and optimistic. It feels to me like the odds of getting a coherent and helpful federal technology policy as regards to privacy, or anything that negatively impacts the revenue potential of these massive tech companies, I feel like it's just highly unlikely. But you're more on the ground than I am. So what is your perspective on this?
Yeah, I mean, as unfortunate as it is, I actually also agree with you. I think I mean, I just looked at how the federal government was dealing with AI regulations and the point is that there are none.
Yeah.
There's no regulations on AI. There's no regulations on the development of it or on data centers even like nothing in the realm of AI has been regulated on a federal level and if they really wanted to, they probably could and instead they're focused on the wrong things, in my opinion, in the tech world because the legislators don't understand technology. I mean, a lot of them are like 70 years old, probably have a staffer that tells them like what to say. So I just don't really see it happening. Same with privacy as much as I want to be optimistic. So at that point, I'm focusing my work on trying to get other states to then pass like privacy laws.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's much more realistic. Um, and you bring up a good example with AI because for years, I mean, I feel like every legislator pays lip service to the need to regulate AI, and they're like, no, AI is 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 positive. We just need guardrails. That's the term I've heard for years. Is it just needs
Yeah.
guardrails? And I'm thinking it's 2026. Where's a single guardrail? I mean, because AI brings up so many different issues. How is that crossing into your work?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think in terms of like AI governance work, a lot of the stuff I've seen and done has been related to like deep fakes and
Mm.
you know, in political advertising. I did that last year closer to the election, the federal presidential election in the US, but I've also been kind of curious and looking into a lot of the stuff about data centers because um, just my own hometown in the United States is home to the most data centers in the world, I think,
Wow.
in Northern Virginia. Yeah. So all
Oh,
of them
right.
are
That's right on the backbone. Yeah.
right there. And I've seen kind of, and it's an issue that's like really close to me because I've heard from not just my parents who still live there, but also other people in the area that their energy bills have gone up, that they're seeing the costs being passed down to them. And then I'm just seeing more broadly like this whole uh, consumer-led effort to push back against data centers because companies are spending millions and millions of dollars to put
Oh,
them across the US.
tens of billions. Yeah.
Probably billions, yeah,
Yeah.
not millions.
Yeah.
Um, and they're then, not taking responsibility for the costs, and they're like, "Okay, well, we're gonna use a lot of energy, but then these consumers can pay for it who probably didn't want it there," and it's increasing pollution, decreasing quality of life, and
And
harming their economic.
draining the
Yeah,
water table. Yeah.
exactly. So that's something, that I've been really interested in slash following slash seeing the bills that are being considered because my own home state vetoed a bill under a Republican governor last year that was aiming to regulate data centers, and I'm really trying to like push for stronger regulations in states. I think it's not fair to people like my parents who have no will to be near a data center to have that pop up in their community that they lived in for like over 30 years.
Right. So returning to something a little more smile inducing. I mean, so we talked about California, Colorado. We talked about some wins that are already on the books. Where do you see some wins that are likely to happen in the near future?
Yeah, that's a great question. I also saw recently that Virginia and Washington passed like health privacy bills, and I think that's a really small subset of larger privacy bills that states should be considering or are considering. And these health privacy bills essentially prevent like your sensitive health information going to third parties, and it gives you more autonomy and control over where you're sending your own health data. I think that's so vital for especially women who may be like, again, seeking abortions or seeking contraceptive care or reproductive care. But in general, like our
I think,
health
yeah, that's
data.
in the United States. That's vital for anyone who cares about getting insurance one day.
Yeah, it's so yeah, that's a really good point. It's influencing insurance costs, like so many things. We also just don't want the government to like have our health data. That's,
Yeah.
you know, like baseline level. Like
So
so
yeah, so
so
you said that was Virginia and Washington State was
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent. That is good news. Yeah, that's I mean, I know that I've actually been massively impressed with the health functionality of ChatGPT. And I end up telling it things. And I have a paid account and I'll use the temporary mode, but I also don't trust anything that comes out of that company in terms of, oh no, if you have a paid account and you say don't store this data and use temporary mode, it won't be saved. And I just don't believe it. So but the tool is so valuable that I still use it for certain things. So it's nice to hear that, at least in some places, that health data is getting more secure.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't trust ChatGPT with my health data. I have no idea what they do with it, and I heard they're trying to introduce ads to ChatGPT
Yeah,
now, so I'm like,
yeah,
okay, that's definitely.
for the free and the lowest paid tier, they've already started as of the day of this recording, this week they've started rolling it out in test deployments. Um,
Yeah.
but again, it has been shockingly accurate for the things I've because I don't use ChatGPT as my doctor. I use ChatGPT alongside doctors, and I get certain test results, and I ask each one what they think, and it it is shockingly effective in my experience, and that is a really powerful tool for people. So it would be nice to be able to you, but I totally respect your your perspective of not trusting them at all. I'm in between, where I don't trust them at all, but I also find a lot of value in what the product delivers.
Yeah, I think that's like a good flag because I often get like a lot of people asking me, do you use AI tools? I remember I was in college when I think ChatGPT was like first released and everyone was like, "Oh my God," like my professors were like, "You should use it for an assignment, like this is part of the syllabus." And And so I used it, and like I have used it before. I think it's, important if I'm talking about trying to regulate stuff that I should at least know what that stuff does. And so
Yeah.
I think, the attitude like I'm never going to use it ever, fair. I don't love it. I don't think it's like, doing the things that it probably should be used for, like, advancing better healthcare treatments or identifying, like cancers. Like that's not what it's being used for right now. It's being integrated into everything that we use, sometimes for the wrong reason. But I do think, everyone should still be familiar, because you don't want to be left behind in that sense, and you should be exposing yourself to it whether or not you like it. That's something that I know I was conscious of, because I was like, if I'm talking about it, I should at least understand, like, how it works. So I think it's fair. It's kind of like a push-pull relationship, but
Yeah. Yeah, that's a healthy perspective.
yeah.
So for listeners who are really interested, which I think honestly it covers a lot of people these days in terms of uh, privacy issues and issues around tech policy and how tech is regulated. Uh, everything as calcified as progress is on actually creating new tech policy at the federal level, the landscape of, as you say, state legislation, as well as the landscape of what these tech companies are actually doing every day, is changing so rapidly. But not everyone's going to spend 40 hours a week like you staying on top of everything. How would those listeners be most effectively stay on top of some of these more important issues and how they're evolving?
That's a really good question. I mean, I love there's a lot of good like independent tech and culture reporters out there. I know on Substack, like that is like a really big category because people
Huh.
are interested. Yeah, it's interesting. Um, One of my friends, Taylor Lorenz, is a huge tech reporter. She has her own Substack called User Magazine. She's often covering a lot of these big stories and seeing what's going on in Congress. So that's a really good, source that I use to see what's coming up. And then again, like a lot of tech reporters are now on Substack because so many, like the Washington Post just laid off their whole tech vertical. Traditional media may not be reporting on tech or holding it as accountable as they used to, but I love Substack for that with the independent reporters. And then I do still really like The Verge and 404 Media, which are also like tech outlets, but 404 Media does a fantastic job of like taking these everyday issues and really putting them in the lens of consumers. And then, if you're interested in it from a civil liberties perspective, as much of a like shameless plug this is, I do think the ACLU's privacy and technology part of the website goes into depth on like what types of lawsuits and what types of issues we're monitoring, and it's very local sometimes. Like I think we just recently last week did one about like a town in Kansas that was using license plate readers. So we definitely do try to cover things across the US and participate in it in advocacy or litigation in whatever ways we can. So those are some of the ways that I keep up with it when everything's crazy. I think they're really useful for just anyone looking to learn more.
Excellent. Well, Pratika, for any listener interested in following you personally, I understand that despite the recommendations of the ACLU, you have accounts on all the social media platforms, and your handle is at Pratika Katiyar,
Yeah.
and the link, that information, the link will be in the show notes. Which platforms do you tend to use most?
So I don't use TikTok. I'm not on TikTok and never have been,
Okay.
because of just like a lot of reasons, sometimes work reasons, and then just a personal preference. I also, have tried to limit my usage of like Twitter slash X, because of just everything that goes on that platform. It's become kind of like overrun with bots, but I still have an account on it. I think Instagram is where I'm most active and am usually like posting videos and other things. And as much as, I'm not a fan of Meta, I still am a Gen Zer who is on social media. So Instagram is like probably the best bet, and then LinkedIn.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for coming out today. Thank you for sharing your insight on this. I mean, yeah, like I say, I find it a really depressing topic, but it's incredibly important, incredibly timely and relevant. So, and I appreciate not only your insight, but the fact that you're not jaded like I am about it, so we could have a nice, productive conversation about it.
Thank you. Yeah, I had so much fun chatting with you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Healthier Tech Podcast. Hit follow on your favorite app. And if you're ready to take control of your tech wellness, visit shieldyourbody.com. Use code POD to save up to 15% on tools that help you live healthier in a wireless world.